Thanks for having me, everybody. I guess I'll just start as I'm a kayaker. I have a friend that lives in Wilsonville, and I go kayaking with him down in the Willamette down there pretty regularly. Really nice. See the really natural part of the Willamette River. And then recently I was in Monterey Bay and got to do a little kayaking off the aquarium, saw otters and everything. That was pretty magical. So I know what you guys like to do. Do you want to open this up? The first screen or the first slide is just kind of an overview. So mostly it's pictures and maps and oh, can you hear me? Go there we go. Thank you. A little better. It's mostly slides with pictures and maps and stuff like that. And cruise through it pretty fast probably, and then leave lots of time if anybody has questions. So here's just a quick overview. Start with my background and go over a little bit. I don't know how much you guys know of the history of the Willamette. I'm guessing you probably are pretty familiar. So I'll cruise through that. What our monitoring efforts are. I skipped over CSOs and pipes, E. coli results, and then I threw in harmful algae blooms stuff because I was guessing that's something you'd also be interested in.
You can talk about Ross Island?
I can talk a little about Ross Island. So I had a feeling you'd want to talk about that, so I figured I'd go ahead and put it in there. So why don't you skip to the next one? Like I already said, I started in 1996. I got lots of great historic photos. So this is actually the guys that came from the river way back in the early days that were not really BES or whatever the utility was called at that point. I started with BES and moved to group running now because I'm more of a data computer guy. And so that was kind of a better fit for me. What we do, we have big permits. So there's the treatment plants, and we have a stormwater permit that requires a whole ton of monitoring to go through the plant and stormwater system. So we have a lot of regulatory stuff we have to do. So that's what my group coordinates, all those monitoring plans, and then make sure that field operations is doing them, the lab's running the lab analyses, and then we send reports back to DEP for all that stuff. We do a lot of other monitoring. The Columbia Sediment Program has contamination, so we have a lot of stormwater sampling going on up there. Thank you. And then we also do a lot of flow monitoring in the sewer system. So they'll actually climb down in the system and install flow meters. So we do lots of stuff. They've got a jet boat and fish shot boat and all kinds of fun toys. So yeah, basically my group just puts together all the plans for the lab and field crew, so they know exactly where to go and what to test, and they just do what they do best, which is get out in the field with the equipment, or in the lab's case, run the lab instrument. So you can go ahead and the next one. So starting with the Willamette watershed, as you guys probably know, it's pretty interesting that it flows north as opposed to south or east or west, like the called South Ohio River also goes north. It's the bottom one there, you can see impermeable surfaces. You can really see Portland and the big cities. Really, the majority of it is not very urban. And then the right side again just kind of shows the extent of the watershed from Eugene down to Portland. Go on to the next one. So obviously it was a working river to start and had a lot of industry all along it. These are some great historic photos of what the riverfront used to look like before seawalls and all that kind of thing. So this was obviously early days, late 1800s, early 1900s. So if you go to the next one, you can see this is where they started building the combined sewer system, which was basically one big brick pipe that went to the river that took all the sewage and the rainwater into one pipe to the river, which was magical because it was getting really nasty in the streets and these trenches where the sewage was. And when the rain, I can't even really imagine what it was like before they built it. Anyway, the street was wet and gross. So they built these great hand-built brick sewers straight to the river, which was great. Well, then you can go to the next one. The problem is, I don't have it here, but there's a picture maybe you've seen. It's the mayor with a bunch of children around. It says demand clean rivers. Well, the people started complaining just how nasty the river was now because we were funneling everything straight to the river so quickly through those nice big pipes that they built. The next one, which I think is also dead, which you probably could see, is the 1940 video that OSU put out. And it's almost the early color And it shows these guys hold up a jug of live fish in a jar, and then they pour them in the river into like a box that contains the fish, while a guy's holding a stop clock. Like literally, it looks like the old clock you have sitting on your nightstand, and he like times how long it takes the fish to die. And it was like 5 minutes because there's no oxygen left in the river from canneries and all this other waste that was going in. And then another part of the video shows some people fishing right with the outfall just blowing around, gnarly, pretty bad water. So it got really bad. People started complaining. And so, the next one. So we built the treatment plant in 1952, Columbia Boulevard treatment plant. It was a brilliant design or idea to route most of it to Columbia Boulevard and our outfalls to the Columbia River, not to the Willamette. Columbia is about 7 times the size of the Willamette River, and dilution is very helpful at an outfall. And that turned out to be a very good idea because we have a really big treatment plant that's started to the Columbia River. Our outfalls on page 9. So when they built the treatment plant is when they built the diversions. So those big pipes that went straight to the river, they put dams in the way to divert all the flow to the treatment plant. So now it's not just all just going straight to the river. They were combined pipes, so they couldn't be totally blocked off. So when it rains a lot, they would overflow the dams and then go out the old pipes, hence combined sewer overflows. So we had these pipes all over, up and down both sides, in the Columbia Slough with these diversions, and every time it rained, it would rise and some would go over those dams. So we go to the next one. We got sued by the Northwest Environmental Advocates, sued the city of Portland for the CSO problem, how much sewage we were putting in there. And so we started on the project to fix the CSO problem. And the first big pipe was on the Columbia Slough, and it runs length out there and captured 99% of overflow. The area wasn't as big, and they were able to build a pipe big enough to capture almost all of it. Then we moved on to the 2 big pipes on the other side of the Willamette River. The west side was done in 2006, and then the east side finally in 2011, which is crazy for me to think that was 13 years ago. You know, I started in 96, and I thought a CSO problem was like, oh, there's career, you know, and now I am 13 years beyond that. So it's kind of crazy. The inside of the big tunnel is it's 27 feet, has a train tracks down the middle for maintenance and things like that when they need to. And I just like that cartoon where they talk about somehow. We can go on to the next one.
That's the question.
Oh, sure, please, yeah.
Is when it becomes a microphone. Or you can repeat.
Or I can repeat, yeah.
When it becomes CSO, is it then F1? Does that make the regular grade? Just when it becomes CSO, is that the same category of students?
The question is when it's CSO, is it the same category as sewage? And the answer is not exactly. It's diluted with stormwater, but it is definitely high in bacteria. You know, I don't know how a good way to put it. Like raw bacteria or raw sewage obviously has, I don't know, millions and millions of bacteria. You start diluting it down. Okay, now you're in hundreds of thousands maybe in CSO, but it's still a lot. You know, the dilution of the stormwater, you know, I know that our engineer was trying to talk about how much that is. It's a tough one to that, but it's not great. It's still, it wouldn't be considered, when you say effluent, I think of effluent from a treatment plant, which is actually way cleaner than CSO. Obviously, we cleaned it, we disinfected it. By the time it's going out on outfall, we don't need it. It's that is way cleaner. That's
If the CSO more sewage or more just stormwater?
Well, that's what I was getting at. It's kind of hard to say. It depends on the basin and how much, you know, maybe half and half in some basins, maybe a little more stormwater than sewage. It kind of depends on the plant.
Okay, thank you.
I keep going. I know I'm going fast. I talk fast, so feel free to jump in and tell me. Okay, let's go to the next one. So yeah, one of the pictures didn't show up, but I assume you're aware that the lower harbor is a Superfund site. And it's mostly because the sediment is laden with metal, and pesticides and other things that the industries and all that part of the industry dumps, that part of the river dumped into the river back in the day before there were a lot of regulations. And so one of the other things in my career, I've been a lot of time right up in this part of town, straight up minutes from the bottom of a small pipe to try to identify which properties could be the sources that we're seeing in the river, and then pass that up to our lawyer. Now we're into this phase where they're doing the real allocation, which is basically who's going to pay to clean up which spots. And some industries are on the hook. Well, we're partly on the hook because we have a conveyance system, of our storm system, and a lot of contamination at the end of our pipes. We obviously didn't necessarily generate those chemicals and all of that, but we are on the hook to also help clean it up. So anyway, I don't know how long this work's gonna take. Lawyers are involved, figuring out how much money people should pay, and it could be a while. Yes, sir. Where's the southern? It is right by, just down from the Mooresville Bridge, right up into town, like the Steel Bridge, I think, is right there. Yeah. That's kind of where I think they even extended it up a little bit. Originally, it was more Swan Island, but then they moved it up a little further.
What's the distinction with the red line?
The red line, that's a good question. Oh, what is the red line? The blue is the area of the Portland Harbor Superfund site. The red line, I can't read what that says. I forget what. It's the something study area. Well, that's what it's saying. It's the Portland Harbor study area. So yeah, this whole section down and still got a lot of cleanup to do. And it's all about fish advisory, about resident fish, including bass or sturgeon or anything that don't go into the ocean and come back, like salmon. Those are the ones that build up the metals and the PCBs. And really trying to let a lot of folks eat so many. You know, so people are really trying to live off the fish and the river, like you kind of get to about either too much with your children, so it's a tough one. And I know that it would be great if we could clean it all up back to what it should be, but I think there's going to have to be a lot of happening where they just cover areas and go with clean cement and things like that. And I know there's folks that are not totally excited about all the solutions for all the cleanup, but some of it's really hard, as you can imagine, the bottom of the river with 40 feet deep. And stirring it up better than just capping it in place. So the veterinarians figuring out what's the best option for each zone where there's.
How are you capturing the bottom of the river?
That's a very good question. Some of it is natural attenuation. Over time, sediment slowly covers over these areas. So that's an easy way. Don't do anything. But I believe in some areas, I don't know if you're familiar with like McCormick and Baxter, the site that's by the St. John's Railroad Bridge. That whole area is entirely capped. The whole bank of it is armored with these big concrete, and it's to totally just cap the contamination that's on that property. Nothing will ever be built there. It has been totally sealed off from the river. It's that kind of thing. And now, of course, that's on land, but at the bottom of the river is a little tougher to obviously.
What's the material, like concrete or what?
The capping material, it's usually soil, clean soil, covered with a layer of plastic, and then just cover the thing. So you don't want water flowing through it. It's like a landfill at that point. You don't really want rain percolating through it, because then obviously that could leach stuff out. I knew you guys were the one to know about that super fun.
You say St. John, you're talking about the area south of the bridge. So there's nothing go by like that.
Right there is the St. John's Railroad Bridge, right? And then just to the south of that is the McCormick and Baxter. It's kind of next to the University of Portland. Has some property down there too.
So what's the expected lifetime of these caps?
Do you think lasting 1,000 years, 100 years?
A long time. Unfortunately, these metals and PCBs are not going away either. They don't really deteriorate and stuff. And so the idea is to hopefully cap them forever. But they'll probably have to go back and check them and redo them if there's no failing.
What if they have to dredge the river for the ships and stuff to go through?
Fortunately, we do not have to dredge the river for passage. At this point, the Army Corps of Engineers, you know, they're really the ones that deal with all that kind of stuff. It would definitely be a problem if they had to restrict it as part of the river. What can't they do now?
Coordinate with the Corps of Engineers?
Well, we as BES don't really get too involved in the sampling in the river itself. There've been contractors have come out and done sampling, and I'm sure, you know, they work with the Corps of Engineers if they're gonna be out on the river doing stuff. But as far as dredging, is that you were asking if coordinators from dredging?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't, like I said, we don't really get dredging as part of the river. I know the Corps does dredging up on the Columbia River, in different places, but, not really, fortunately. Yeah, touching the sediment here is definitely. I had a friend that went to the EPA site, and there was a section where they call it a tar bottom, where there was a whole section of tar that just ran down into the edge of the river. And it was, you know, really big, and it was an early action site, and they put big booms all around it, and they got in there with barges and crane, you know, grabbers, dug it all out, took it all out of the river, put it on barges and took it away, and the whole time he was monitoring the edge of that boom that was trying to keep the contamination from getting washed downstream as they were doing it. Just disturbing that stuff is troublesome. You know, it's hard to contain it. And so I think they only do it in a really, like I said, like this spot where it was just a whole thing of tar. They decided, well, we should probably take that out. But that's when you get into the cleanup within the river, it's not. BES is not really that part too much. We're just trying to help figure out who put it there. Try to get ourselves maybe off the hook. Sure.
30-second pause.
So a lot of summer recreation stuff started coming up. We had the big float. There was a Red Bull flu tag or whatever that was called. There was the triathlon. There was people swimming. And so we started getting calls about, hey, can you test the river for E. coli ahead of our event? And we got several of those over the first couple summers, right as we were finishing the CSO system. And then Dean Marriott, our previous director, said, well, why don't we just start sampling the river and just put up some numbers so people know what the bacteria levels are now that we've officially finished the big pipes. And then that's when our public information folks got involved and were like, oh, yeah, cool, let's build a website and we can put the stuff up there and give people information about the river too. And so that's what we did. And we created the Check the Wreck website, which was in 2012. So again, I'm like, can't believe it's 12 years later. Yeah, why don't we flick over to it? So I don't know if you folks have seen this. If you scroll down a little bit there. Oh, there we go. So that's, oh yeah, now that's annoying. Well, you can see we have 5 weekly testing sites and then 3 monthly sites that we do year round. And so you can click on these to go and look at the results from each site. So no, go down to like Cathedral Park boat launch. I'm just, yeah, click on that and see if that works. I think we're testing things by, oh, there we go, it worked. All right, so last result was 72.3. I think it might be blocking out the E. coli number behind the thing. I think it was like 23. There we go. So, oh, I'm sorry. So we built the, I'm sorry? Yes, in Fahrenheit. So it is getting warm out in the river for sure, which is not good for the fish, unfortunately, but it's good for swimming and recreation. So you can see there the numbers, like we've been in the single digits. We got a 23. I kind of chalked that up to that rain event that we had weekend before we took that sample. Yeah, so it doesn't take much. Actually, if you go back to my presentation, that's when the next part is really, I can start showing some results. Uh, So there we go. So there's the map of all the locations. So the yellow ones are the weekly summertime ones, and then the green ones are the ones we do monthly. And we've been doing those monthly sites since the 90s. So we had some additional sites back in the day, but we've dropped some over time, realizing that the river's pretty well mixed. And so we were oversampling it basically. We just kept getting the same results. So we kind of dialed it back. That's Katie taking a sample actually from the Portland Boathouse dock right there. That's a picture I think put on the website. And then I don't know if you guys are interested in how we do the E. coli analysis. It's called Col Alert, where we basically dump it into that tray. They incubate it, then they look at it under a black light. And all the ones that are yellow mean total coliform, and the ones that glow are E. coli. And they just count how many big cells and little cells there are. And it's a statistical analysis thing where you look at a chart and it tells you what the E. coli numbers should be. I just want to explain that because when you see E. coli numbers, people get real hot and heavy, like, oh my God, this one was 400 and then this one was 375. Well, those are really, really similar in the way the math works on this. And it's not an exact number, if you know what I'm saying. They're guessing at the number of its most probable number of E. coli per 100 milliliters. Well, that's where it's tough. So E. coli is a indicator of sewage. It's not what you would actually get sick from if you swam in it. You would get sick from Giardia or some other pathogen that's like the normal, like if you were to drink out of a creek when you're hiking or something. That's why I always filter the water. It's the same idea, but we use E. coli as the indicator for sewage. So that's just to clarify there. But the 406 is the recreational Oregon State water quality recreational limit. That's the standard that they set. And it was based on some math and a study that someone did that if the bacteria was of this certain level and you're recreating in it, which means you probably drank, I don't know, got some small amount in your mouth. What of 1 out of 1,000 people would get sick? So it's the math of where's that amount of bacteria that needs to be in the water that would lead to 1 in 1,000 swimmers would get Giardia. Not E. coli poisoning, but some other illness. And so it's based on some interesting math and studies how they come up with those numbers. I'll just let you know, because obviously we have a lot of wildlife that also their E. coli also shows up. This is not just human E. coli we're talking about. And so it can get confusing when you also have a lot of wildlife that are contributing and stuff. So you can see in the Willamette, it's such a big river that we're down to like single digits. But when we sample some of the smaller streams, we can easily get 200, 300s because of the wildlife and because there's so much less dilution, because it's such a small stream and a little bit of turbidity with some raccoon poop in it or something can easily trigger an E. coli result that's a little bit higher. Now, just so you know, we use limits of like 10,000 to mean we've got a raw sewage problem. Somebody needs to get out there ASAP. So I'm talking about creeks now. If we sample a creek and get something that's screaming high like that, we can almost guarantee there's a sewer leak on that stream. It gets a little gray area when you start getting down into the below 2,000, 1,000, if it's rained or not, is the stream turbid or not. The river's brown, all the sediment in the river, a lot of that particles in the river can have bacteria on them. And that we will get a higher number for sure when the river's brown with the sediment. It's just guaranteed, just because you're going to get more bacteria off those sediment particles that are in the water column. And so actually, let's go to the results too. That'll, I think, now that we're kind of getting into that part. I think, yes, single digits is really good. So here we go. Here's check the rec results. Red line is 406. This is back to when we started. I tried to highlight a couple of the ones here. The first year we did it, we were at Willamette Park Dock at the end of September. It was early October, and the river was really low. And the dock sits down, and there's the boat launch right there, and there's geese all over the place. And our team was sampling the end of the dock, but it was like really like turbid from all the boats coming and going. And we got a couple of high numbers there. And so we chalked it up to that because the other sites didn't have high numbers. Then this other one we got, there was actually, we went October 1st, September 28th, we had a CSO event. There was 3 inches of rain. We had a CSO, and we detected some higher bacteria at all the sites. We have since dialed back sampling later into September and avoiding October, like that end of the season. It generally is when it starts getting colder and starts raining. People aren't swimming anymore, and we shut down the weekly sampling at those 5 sites. I think it's about mid-September, just after Labor Day or something, when we usually stop going out doing the weekly sampling. So you can see where we've been now. We haven't had any real higher numbers at all over these last several years.
Citizen science.
As far as them taking samples or them, it's tough. Yeah, I've worked with, oh yeah, the question was about citizen science and can you guys help? And I've had discussions with schools and things about taking bacteria samples, and it always gets a little weird because obviously you need to have gloves and you need the sterile equipment and you need to use a cooler and you need to get the ice and you need to get it to the lab within 24 hours. So there's a lot of little things that need to happen right for that sample to be considered good. Our lab won't accept anything if it's not in the right bottle, like, or for E. coli. They won't even run the test if it's not a sterilized bacteria bottle that's like valid and, you know, has been from within a certain date, you know, that kind of thing. They're pretty strict about that. So E. coli is a tough one to get folks to do, but it's possible. You know, it just takes some training and getting people bottle kits and things. But we at the Water Pollution Control Lab, you know, we don't really work with the citizens in that way. It's interesting, but we tend not. We have basically a field crew that we rely on to do all that stuff. Do you guys know where the Water Pollution Control Lab is? I didn't really mention that. It's right under the St. John's Bridge. It's a maroon building. It's kind of got a raindrop in front of it, and on the east side. It's right next to Cathedral Park. Yeah, and so it's a great place to work. They built it in right around 2000, so I've been working there ever since it was built. And so we are right by the Cathedral Park boat launch, which is convenient for our team with their boat, because and we're up there because we're closer to the treatment plant and all the industries. A lot of that stuff's up there, so that made sense. The lab was originally at the treatment plant, but we moved to this other location. The next chart was the ambient monthly. So now these are the results from when we go every month from the 3 Sorry, you got a question, sir? Oh. September 28th, 2013.
And the projects are done. Why is it?
My favorite question. No. His question is, why do we still have CSOs when we spent $1 billion to build 3 big pipes? It's a good point. The reality is when it rains so much, we couldn't build a pipe big enough. So it's 27 feet in diameter. There was a cost benefit that we couldn't build it any bigger. And that was basically where we had to draw the line as far as our ability to capture stuff. The reality, and I don't know if we probably can't open the link, but we used to get up to 50 overflows a year. Every time it rained a decent amount. And now we get on average 3. And they're only during those super big deluge that fills all the pipes. The treatment plant does its best to like recirculate flow. We use the pipes as storage, but what happens, you guys probably know, when you get a big inch after inch after inch of rain, the system just fills up and they see it coming. We're watching the rain and they're like, yep, we're going to see us, so we can't hold it. And it just fills the whole system. And so we have I think now only 6 overflow points or 7 overflow points after the big pipes. But it still definitely happens, and it always makes the news, and people always ask that same question. And we try to say, but it's only 3 times a year, not 50, so it was literally every time it rained in the old days. I'm not sure that's a great answer. Yeah, go.
Capacity. So what's the next plan for the food expansion?
The treatment plant is expanding. So they're currently building new clarifiers, and that's actually part of, now that we're funneling all this wet weather flow to the treatment plant, it needs to get bigger to handle all this flow that we're sending to it. And that's part of the secondary clarifiers they're building. So the way it currently works, during dry weather, the flow goes into the plant, settle out the solids, liquid goes over and gets through bugs, like bacteria eat the bugs in there, microorganisms. We hit it with chlorine, and then we send it out. That's secondary treatment. The wet weather part of the system only does primary treatment. So it only drops the solids out. Then we try to hit it with this flocculant, we hit it with bacteria, and then it goes out. So it doesn't get that whole bacteriological stage of cleaning. And that's the treatment plant is expanding to be able to provide better cleaning of the stormwater also. But they do, when we were building stuff, they're constantly looking at pipe sizes. I mean, it's not just the treatment plant that has to get bigger, but if they build a lot of new apartments or something, the sewer system has to sometimes get bigger, or pump stations have to be able to handle it. So it's definitely, we got engineers definitely keeping an eye on the whole system in that way. I move on to the monthly testings. It's a little more, you can see we got some more numbers over because we're obviously doing this every month of the year. And I tried to highlight the previous rainfall amounts that kind of indicated how we got values over. What we have been seeing too is, obviously it's not just bacteria from our system, but coming down the river too from upstream, other cities upstream having problems like we've seen it when the Kellogg treatment plant had an overflow and that kind of thing. So anyway, definitely still happens, primarily winter. And again, after big storm events, there's definitely still bacteria out there. Yeah, that was the 3.2 inches of rainfall. Again, there was a CSO prior to that one back in, it was March, I think of 15 there. Yeah. So it's different when I looked at the data for the different rainfalls for the days, some days it was, it was like got 1 inch this day, 1 inch that day. And some of them were like 2 inches the day before. It adds up when the whole system gets filled up like that, it starts overflowing. So again, this is mostly, I would say, when like I was talking about, when the river's brown and there's a lot of sediment in there, we can get higher numbers after rain. Yes.
What are the dates on the bottom? What does that span? Months?
It's actually a year. So that's from 1998 through 2024. Yeah, so those are, there's a whole ton. So we actually used to sample the river weekly, then we went to every other week, and then at a point we switched to monthly. So that's where the data kind of isn't as dense on the second half. Because like I said, we were dialing back the monitoring because we were seeing a lot of the same results. So this one, I knew when I put this one on there, I was like, yeah, okay, well, they're going to have a lot of questions about this one because we do get numbers over that 406 recreational standard after big rain events. It's still a fact. But the summertime is when people are out there more, and hence why we're trying to show that with a lot more sampling over the summertime. And I think we're getting onto the HABs stuff. Harmful algae bloom stuff was next. We'll move on to that. So Ross Island Lagoon is a source for algae. It's like a big lake right in the middle of our river. It gets real stagnant and the algae grows up in there. And then when it dies, it gets really cold all of a sudden, it'll come flooding out. And then you get that green streak along the edge of the Willamette by Omsey, and it'll come across the river over to River Place, and you'll see it by the docks. I'm assuming you guys have seen this. I'm on a group from the DEQ is responsible for the river and this algae issue, not BES, because it's state water of the state. And so they have been going out and taking samples. They go out and try to identify what kind of algae we have, because it's really the blue-green algae that's the real problematic one that can actually kill dogs if they drink it. It makes people sick, but the real danger is pets or dogs in particular. If they drink it, they can die. So they go out and they check what's growing in the lagoon, and they're keeping an eye on it. And I get emails about what they're seeing, and so that's why I shared some links here. There's a new station at USGS set up at OMSI that looks at phycocyanin and other things. So it's right down from the Ross Island Lagoon, that OMSI location. The health authority, yeah, so they put out notifications. I don't know if any of you folks are on their notifications for lakes. I get notifications about Detroit Lake and other lakes getting shut down for swimming because of harmful algae blooms each summer. Kind of depends on how hot it is. Some summers aren't so bad, some are really bad. And we're kind of in the same boat. We've kind of dodged it with the Ross Island this year because I think the temperature is kind of going up and down for whatever reason. We haven't had a big algae bloom, but what you can see in this picture on the right is infrared imagery. So I've got some other links, and that thing that's glowing yellow in the bottom right, that's Oaks Bottom Reservoir, and so that gets real algae, but it's not connected to the river, fortunately. So it doesn't. Once it gets low enough, that new bridge or new tunnel we built and all, none of that's really getting out. But you can see how Ross Island Lagoon is turning kind of a slightly warmer color, and then even downtown, I think algae has kind of started in the Swan Island Lagoon in that channel back there sometimes too. But really, it's the Ross Island Lagoon that's generally been our source of issues. And then last on that, I have heard that they've been studying what to do about it, and they've contemplated cutting a hole in Ross Island Lagoon to let flow through to try to prevent it from being so stagnant and being like a lake. It seemed like a good idea, but that involves Ross Island Sand and Gravel still owns the southern part. They gave the northern part to the city, so the northern part's a park, which you guys have probably landed on that part, but the bottom part they're still operating. And so they're still there. Yes.
I was wondering if the big fire that was recently on the island impacted the water at all.
Not aware about the fire. What was the big fire? I guess I'm out of the loop. Yeah.
Big fire on South Side.
Oh, tires. No, I guess I'm not really aware what happened there. Sorry. And it was a pile of tires that were burning or something.
Southeast definitely, but you can't remember where exactly it was.
I don't. And I think that was my last slide. Did I have any more?
Real quick, what's this?
Phycocyanin. It's basically they tried looking for that blue-green algae. The blue-green algae that they're looking for, that's really the bad one. And USGS, I think they're even kind of testing out these sensors at this OMSI gauge. And I think inside OMSI, there's like an interactive thing for kids to look at the results and that kind of stuff. But I think it's a bit of a test site to see whether they can use it to tell us when the Ross Island Lagoon is discharging.
Regulates that health.
DEQ and then Oregon Health Authority puts out the official notifications, but the DEQ lab out in Beaverton, I think, runs the samples, and they have a crew that goes out and takes samples. I know USGS has some biological folks that go out and do some of the identification, so it's a bit of a team effort, but ultimately OHA puts out the notifications if there's something happening. And that's the new swim dock right down from the lab at the St. John's Railroad Bridge, or St. John's Bridge. They took out there was an old kind of swim bridge dock there that had a chain link fence along it and all. And so they just built this not too long ago. Yeah, the water's clean. Just don't eat the sediment or too many fish. Yeah.
boats have any impact on any of this stuff, the houses, super fun, the mixing up, whatever? They are contributing to the problem.
I don't, as far as the issues that I know we're concerned with, not so much. But I do know the erosion, like I was saying, the kayaking in Wilsonville, I see a lot of boats going by and the erosion that they can cause with all the big wakes. And my friend who lives down there was telling me about there's certain zones that only the boats that do the really big wake are only supposed to do it in certain parts of the river to prevent erosion. I think that's the biggest issue with it.
Screwing things up, whatever.
I think, this part of the river is so compacted or armored or industrial. It has docks and pilings and a little less of a concern, I think, unfortunately, just because it's so urban. I know, like, you can see the pilings in front of our lab. It used to be a plywood mill and used to have a big dock out in front of it. And as some other industries are trying to clean up, they've actually come and removed some of the pilings from in front of our building. So slowly they're trying to remove old pilings out of the river as much as they can because they're full of creosote and they're not helping anything. They're just a navigation hazard and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right up to the left of those trees, right up on the hill, right there. Is that an industry that's down the street? I know Anchor. Oh.
This is located just north on the river. They're just like, okay.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, I realize I've gone pretty long. I don't know if you guys have more questions. Yes, sir. And then, so the question was about folks living on boats on the river and testing around them. And we're not talking floating homes, which are those actual houses that have sewer systems and are floating on the water, but folks living in sailboats and different things. Back in that Holgate Channel around Ross Island, there's a few actually, they're not showing up in my picture, but there's some folks up by our lab too that are camping on boats. It's a bit of a challenge. I know that they used to tie up at like the Selwood Park, and we talked to park rangers about it, and they can move them along once in a while when they're out in the river. Again, it's kind of like the sheriff's department's responsibility to deal with them, just as far as making them move or anything. And they don't make them move, obviously, very often, unless they're tied up one of our public docks or something. You can stay at a public dock for like a week or something, and then they'll kick them off. As far as their discharge of sewage, we're pretty sure they probably are. Not really sure what we can do about it. We could go around testing around people's boats, but it's a big river, and unless we're there at just the right time, chances are we're probably not going to see anything. I had a similar experience with some of our natural area people. So we restore natural areas, BES, right? So out by Johnson Creek. Flood areas and stuff. Well, a lot of people moved into those areas and really destroyed a lot of the stuff that we had worked on. A lot of our people got really bummed, and they were like, "Can you get an E. coli sample to show that they're pooping in the creek, and then we can make them move?" And all. And it was like, well, the picture of the toilet paper and the poop down the bank of the creek is all you need. You don't need somebody to go out there and take an E. coli sample to verify we have a problem. It's a bigger issue. Getting a sample, unfortunately, doesn't motivate people to then make them leave. Just because we get a high number, I guess, is ultimately it's not going to trigger them getting kicked out. It's really the sheriff's department and how they're dealing with those folks that's a bit of a challenge.
So do you guys have any power if you find out there's something wrong, maybe?
We have a spill response group, and people call us. I believe we've gotten calls from kayakers saying, "Hey, I was out on the Holgate Channel and I saw somebody pooping over the side or whatever, dumped a bucket or something." I'm not sure exactly what the report was, but it's tough. Again, like our spill response people, they don't have a boat. They don't really have a way to go out and do anything about it. I think they just pass it on to another agency that, like, "Hey, we got this report," probably ends up dying at the sheriff's department somewhere, and they don't necessarily have any crew to do anything about it, unfortunately. It's a tough one because we also, our spill response call gets a lot of calls about RVs dumping sewage on our streets. It's a pretty regular, pretty much every day almost. And, they can run around and verify it, but they're pretty sure it's going to be there. And so it's a challenge. And again, BES, we want all the sewage to go in our sewer system, obviously. We brought around porta potties during the pandemic and stuff and put them out in places to try to keep people from just defecating on the streets and other places. And it's tough. We actually have a pump out program where we were going around pumping out RVs, sewer tanks for free for folks, because some of them like don't have gas or they can't actually move this thing to go to an RV dump station. And we were getting accused of like, well, that's going to promote more of it. And like, well, there are already a lot of them and they're already dumping sewage everywhere. So we're just trying to deal with the issue that already exists. So that's tough. When we get into that realm, we definitely look to others to help us with those challenges. And we try not to, and like I said, our natural people, they want to get really mad about it, but we're like, look, these are people we're talking about and it's a bigger issue. And we're just, it's better now. We see a lot of our natural areas are cleared out now. They're starting to come back. We're replanting and stuff is definitely getting better. But it's a challenge. The boats one is definitely a challenge. Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a bad idea to combine them. All other basic cities, you have separated systems. You've got a storm system and you have a sanitary system. In fact, big parts of our city are that way. Some parts of downtown, East County, a lot of the stormwater there goes down into sumps, down into the ground instead of going in. But we tried a lot of downspout disconnection. We tried to remove as much stormwater from that area as possible. But the cost of separating the pipes was so immense that this was the better option, was just to try to keep as much stormwater out of the system and then build pipes to catch it. Oh, no, Seattle's dealing with it. And in fact, the Seine in Paris was just talking, I don't know if you heard about that. Every time it rains, they're getting sewage. Diane Dolkin, our public information officer, said they were potentially going to do an article about, Willamette River and the Seine and how we've dealt with our CSO system, and they're still struggling with it and that kind of thing. So we were a little ahead of the game. And fortunately, because the construction of that stuff was super expensive, and if we were to do it now, would be way more expensive. So it was a good thing we got started back when we did. But there's definitely other cities that the swales have helped a lot slow down the flow. So if you can imagine, one of the big issues is the volume of water all coming at once. So the swales help slow down that peak. And what we've also learned really help with stormwater, cleaning stormwater, remove metals and stuff like that from places where it's actually going right back into a creek or something like that. I think they tried to quantify it. They really wanted it only to be on the east side and kind of the flat areas, because you don't want to be disconnecting your downspouts and flooding out your basement of your neighbor's house and stuff like that. So they had to be really careful about where they were telling people to disconnect their roof drains. Right. Yeah. Stormwater manual says you have to have some form of stormwater treatment, swale or something like that. Yep. And we do too. The city, as we build stuff, we're putting in all kinds of different types of treatment. I know we're trying a new thing called permeable pavement, where the flow just goes right through the pavement itself. And we're going to try to figure out a way to sample like how it is coming out the other side. We're working on that right now. All right. Well, thanks.